And here we are again. Hello and welcome to Innovation Culture Coding, the show where I feature innovative consultants and coaches who are going to deconstruct a case live inside the show. Today, it's a very, very exciting show, and I have a guest. That's why we're a little later than usual from the US, and I will introduce him shortly. So, today we're looking into leading transformation, how to build human capabilities that change organization for good. So, that's the topic we dive into today, and I would like to welcome Michael Leckie. Hello,
Hello, Jens.
how
How
are
are
you
you?
doing?
Good.
It's great to have you here.
Good to be here.
So I'm just switching on a banner for those of you who are interested. And I see already a couple of people joining. Um, heitlandinnovation.com/innovation culture coding. You will find everything about this show. And of course, this episode specifically, there's a landing page where you will find Michael and you can see the video. You can find the audio version. You can find clips and more specifically as well, the book and so on later on. Um, but not more on that right now. Michael, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you, and what are you doing for a business?
Sure. I spent most of my career in corporate roles, large organizations like General Electric, Bloomberg, Gartner, and most of that in different kinds of roles, both internal consulting, people, human resources, organization development, change and learning. I also did that as an external consultant for large and small consultancies, and then ran a P&L at Gartner as well around their CXO advisory business. And about 2+ years ago, I escaped the corporate life and started to work for myself. I have a small consultancy with a few kind of ecosystem partners. And the bulk of my work is around how do you actually build change as a capability, not just try and make a change. So how do you build change as a capability in your organization, which seems to be getting a lot of traction with the amount of transformation going on, both driven by digital and everything else.
Yeah, it's a huge topic, so I can imagine you're crazy busy. And or let's say there's a lot of demand in that direction.
There
Definitely, you
certainly
see.
is. Certainly is. A lot of demand and not a lot of great answers, unfortunately, still.
Yeah, yeah. So that's why I'm super interested in the case today, because I think you're taking that case in not the usual way like some innovators would do, going into a specific process. You take that in a slightly different way and really look into transforming the company. And I'm really interested in showing that case today and deconstructing it together with you.
Sure.
So the case is about a large organization that is doing a digital transformation. And they not do a digital transformation in a small scale, they directly do it in large scale, which means across the whole value chain of that business. So they will be developing different operating models and really look into how they make this digital transformation as a part of their business. So, of course, they need someone helping them on implementing that and finding out what the strategy is and all of that. And they reached out to you on asking you for help. So, that's the starting point. How do we take it forward? How would you engage with that company?
Sure. So great question. Let's start with the fact that the work that I was doing was not primarily around coming up with here's the new strategy. They knew where they wanted to go. They had the data, they had the information, they know what's going on in the market. And need to protect the organization's, privacy, obviously, but it's a large, organization in the, let's just say in the retail space, very large organization in the retail space. And they're looking at all the things that digital is doing, whether that be around, planning, predictive analytics, fulfillment through distribution centers and fulfillment centers, all aspects of supply chain, et cetera. And doing this in an environment driven by COVID, where supply chain has been massively disrupted, and of course, expectations still just continue, to rise for getting what you want as a consumer delivered when you want it and having it available. So what we started to talk about was the fact that it wasn't so much about let's get the right model and design. There were any number of models and designs that would actually work. It was about how would the organization actually implement those and embrace them. And what we discovered were things like they have a culture that's really been traditionally built around, to use a term I'm familiar with, is kind of staying in your swim lane, right?
Yeah.
It's like, if I do my job, follow my metrics, get my part done, and everybody does that, it all adds up to greatness. But it doesn't seem to all add up to greatness. And we are in a world now where we need to be much more flexible. And we're hearing this all the time: be more flexible, be more agile, be more collaborative. We're hearing all these great words. And then we just say, go do that. People don't say, well, I'm inflexible and uncollaborative. They already feel like they are. So it's not very helpful that we just kind of spit that out at them. So oftentimes we'll put together a bunch of meetings or plans or structures around that, which can be helpful. But what we're focusing on is, what are the behaviors specifically that people need to change? And so we started with the most simplest behaviors I think you can come up with, which are the questions you ask. So we are looking at what are some of the key questions we need to ask ourselves and then figure out to solve. So in this organization, one of those questions is around designing work. And the question is, do we feel that we're comfortable and have the freedom and empowerment to reorganize how we get work done on projects and in our little area to deliver the best outcome? Or do we feel like we're supposed to stay with what's been built? And a lot of times they feel like they have to stay with what's been built. And so we start to engage in that conversation. Well, what would it look like? How might we do it different? What could we do if we had no fear, if there were no limits, if we had a little bit of budget? And we engage them in a conversation around, how are we going to get better at rearranging how we work? As we've picked a number of areas like that, and we're having that dialogue as they try and implement the models and the changes they're making. So we're taking that change right down to the ground level.
Yeah.
And frankly, we're looking for bright spots, for coalition of the willing, who people are saying, I kind of get this, let's roll with that. And then their counterparts in different parts of the organization, because this organization, by the way, is grown through a lot of acquisition and inorganic as well as organic growth.
Yeah.
They start looking at, well, how are they getting that done over there?
Yeah. So what I would like to drill deeper. So you have this conversation, you say. Do you do that then with a lot of parts of the business, or do you focus and start with one, let's say one area of the business to go deeper and then engage with the people who are working on the shop floor, if it's a retailer, or in the distribution center and so on?
Yeah, it's a great question. And in general, it's going to depend upon what's the appetite and the willingness, and kind of how many people are up for engaging in it. And so I have two ways of doing it. And in this organization, we're kind of looking at both. One is, we're starting with just some small areas where we say there's a willingness to try. There's enough of an openness. There's enough good things happening that we have it to build upon. And we're building there in those specific centers or business units. But we also have an approach where we leverage a platform that I partner with, a company called changeforce.ai. And we are able to actually go much broader with, here's the questions we're asking. And we start by asking people, hey, how well are we doing at this? So when it comes to that, designing work, when it comes to failing fast, when it comes to letting innovation happen everywhere, and we define clearly what that looks like, how good are we? And people get a chance to say, oh, you're asking my opinion? I think we're good at this. We're pretty poor at that. We're okay here. Yeah. And then we say, great, thank you for that. What suggestions do you have specifically in your area about how we can do that better? And they give us our thoughts if they want to, kind of a field text. So great, thank you for that. This has all been anonymous, but do you want to raise your hand and say, I want to be a part of a group that actually deals with that in my area? So we use it to surface hidden talent and hidden ideas. Yeah. And then we can communicate with those people, continue to measure what we're doing. And quite frankly, we can also tie it into their business systems and start to say, well, group A in the Northwest is doing this. Group B in the Southwest is not doing this. Yeah. How are their results changing?
Yeah. So when you say willingness to try, is it so? I have been working with large organization, and inside of large organization, often it is like this kind of programs are starting from the top, of course, and then the global management is saying, and you are willing to try, right?
Yeah.
If you said that in a way that it might be different in your case, how do you do that?
Yeah. We start by actually speaking to managers and seeing who really responds and says, I'm up for doing something different myself.
Yeah.
So we lay out for them here's kind of the foundational beliefs of this work. One is that you don't use changes in beliefs to drive changes in behaviors because the beliefs are so fundamentally difficult to change.
Hmm.
You start with changes in behaviors to trigger changes in beliefs, because if you behave in a way you might not normally,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
something unexpected happens, that challenges your assumptions. That happens enough, that assumption, that belief might shift. The second thing is kind of the, it used to be that comment that, was like leaders eat last. Well, the comment I have is leaders go first, in the sense that the leaders have to be willing to actually engage in what they need to change. And so oftentimes in early sessions, we'll talk about, what we're trying to do, and they'll rally around, yeah, we need to be able to do this better. We need to be able to be so much better, innovating everywhere. Okay, what are you doing differently as an individual
Yeah.
to become more innovative yourself?
Yeah.
What? Yeah, no, you as an individual. Okay, and we talk about that, and then we do two things with that. We have them explore that and learn from it, and then we have them share. And that really does two things. It creates empathy for the people they're actually leading through change, because they've actually been through some of the discomfort of some of
Yeah.
it themselves.
Yeah.
And two, it creates that psychological safety, because most of the times, like you said, we introduce change and say, hey, we're all going to change. And by we, I mean you. And we're all going to see how well we do. And by how well we do, I mean, at the end of the year, we're going to judge you on some unknown metric in a performance evaluation, but good luck with that. Trust us. And we don't do anything different. And our people are like, yeah, right. Yeah, we're going to do that. And they keep doing the same thing, because as a leader, we're not changing. So that's really kind of the things we look for to find some of those bright spots, or willingness to change, or willingness to try.
Yeah. So then you identify one, two people who are really open for it, and then you take them, literally helping them understanding how to do that. So you go,
Exactly.
how do you then, and I will drill more into that. So how do you then work with them on the behavior piece?
Great question. So we turn the behaviors into a question. So
Hmm.
a question around looking at, being more innovative. One of the questions might be, what's our third best idea? And so when the group's discussing the idea they have for how to solve something, they say, great, what's your idea there? Oh, it's great. Well, what's your second best idea? Good. Now what's the third best idea? And we do that with everyone. And there's a lot more to it than just asking this question, which may sound kind of silly, because it does a number of things. First of all, you can come up with the one. That's the easy one. It's the one I think the boss wants to hear and I can probably work with.
That's the one you
Number
have in your shelf already since years.
That's right. That's right. And it hasn't changed anything. Number two is the one that maybe it's a little bit of a twist on that, but it's still pretty safe. After that, you're like, well, I got to have something actually new and different here. Then you start to think and you engage in the conversation to come up with something. You have to start to talk out loud and really engage in some different thinking. And I take a simple question like that very seriously. And so I've built, kind of modeled off, kind of lean canvas idea, right? Take a canvas that says, okay, what might be the value in asking your team this question? What's our third best idea? All right. So there may be some value. So you accept that there's a possibility it might be useful. What kind of way do you have to ask that? What attitude or tone? So, there's a difference between, what's your third best idea? Or, okay, that's really interesting. What's your third best idea? Give me that. Those are very different questions. They're the same question, but asked with different intent. And then you have to move to, okay, what was interesting about that? What was useful? What did we learn? What was unexpected? And so that one question can form the basis for an entire conversation that's not only about what was that third best idea, which is where we want to go to be comfortable with that, but what was easy about asking that? What was difficult about asking that? What was hard about answering it? And so we start to learn from each other how to better ask these questions, because we want to get to that point where when that particular question comes up, we're trying to think out of the box. It's like, okay, team, third best ideas, let's go, and get people really working on the stuff that's more innovative and kind of off the wall, so they can bring it back and say, what are we going to focus on?
Yeah. So you do that exercise with the leader, or do you already involve team members from that leader?
Both. We'll kind of prep the leader and give them the tools, and then we'll do it sometimes with them, and then sometimes turn it on their own. Depends upon how comfortable they feel kind of leading the charge with the conversation. I mean, my goal as a consultant eventually is to make sure I'm totally unnecessary to what's going on. And so I try and provide the tools, and I try and walk them through the first, 2 or 3 times. I learned this from a friend of mine, one of the brightest minds in innovation anywhere, Bob Mesta. When he works with his clients, he'll take his jobs to be done approach and do it like 3 times. And it's like, after the third time, we'll have given you all the tools. We'll have trained you all along how to do it. You should be able to do this. So I take a similar approach. Let's engage a little bit more heavily up front until they feel comfortable being a step ahead and learning from it, and then let them take it from there.
Yeah. So then you said going from behaviors to assumptions. How are you doing that, and how do you enable them, the managers, to do it?
Sure. So just to play out the same question, what's our third best idea? The first time we ask that, people are like, they're wondering, why should I ask this question? I've got good people. Just give me your best idea, right? And they don't really see the value. But we have a conversation, and I say, well, what if you're doing something unbeknownst to you that actually is not letting them put their best idea forward because they're giving you the one they think you want? Or what if they haven't really thought about it fresh? They're just recycling something new because they're so busy. So we have that conversation. I go, okay, I'm willing to try asking the question, see if it has value. Then when they get that idea that's out of the blue that they hadn't expected, it's like, well, wait a minute. My assumption was asking this question was a waste of time, but it produced something really interesting. Okay, so my assumption was that we already knew everything we needed to do, and it was all on the table, that we had all of our intelligence out, that we dug deep enough, whatever it may be, but maybe that's not the case. And so they use that question a few more times, and it creates that disconfirming information about their belief that everyone brings me their best ideas all the time, and so I don't need to push any farther. You're like, okay, maybe that assumption is not serving me well, and I need to pause and make sure I'm getting the third best idea every time I'm asking for ideas. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So you literally discuss it with them, you help them to uncover it, that they realize it themselves. And when they realize it themselves, then it's the next step, which then goes from assumptions to beliefs again.
Exactly. And if we'd said to them, look, here's the new belief, we're not digging deep enough and giving our best ideas. It sounds kind of insulting. People think, sure, I am. Yes, I am. Because you always say these things. You say, we need to do these positive things. And the implication is you're not doing the positive thing. But most people feel like they are, and they are. They're trying really hard. So we don't start with trying to change a belief system. We start by changing a behavior. And the behavior is asking a different question that may cause us to become aware of our assumptions or beliefs, and then may cause us to question those assumptions and beliefs, so we have a possibility of changing those assumptions and beliefs. And it's kind of an individual game played in a group, but if it happens at enough places, you get enough critical mass, then you start to have a change in a culture. So culture change starts in the culture of a conversation or the culture of a group or a meeting. It doesn't start organization-wide. It starts in those small pockets. And when you get enough of that happening and people can share those experiences and it becomes shared, then a culture changes. But we tend to approach it completely backwards.
Yeah, normally it's like top down. Hey, we're going to change, like you said. Everyone is changing except me, which means the management.
Yeah, exactly. We have this thing around that, like, oh, here's our new beliefs. We usually them in, these are our new values, right?
Yeah.
Our new values, these are new beliefs. So one of two things happens. One is people say, well, those aren't new. I always kind of felt those way, so I don't have to do anything different. Or two, they don't agree with them. And it's sort of like being a Christian and walking into a mosque and saying, guys, I know you've believed this for hundreds of years, but here's the new truth. Let's go ahead and try that on. People are like, oh, geez, thanks. Where were you? Because we've been wondering what to do for 3,000 years. It doesn't happen. Our beliefs are rooted in our own survival. And so they're really hard to change. And they don't change because of outside forces, and they don't change. I mean, the research shows time and time again, if you have a strongly held belief, and let's assume it's an incorrect one, and I present you with the hard data and facts that prove it, the one thing it does is strengthen your belief. You find a way to believe it more.
Yeah. And trying to convince everyone.
Yeah. And so what happens is most change becomes, or change management becomes propaganda. And, it's people will act like they believe it as long as there's a force applied to them, but it doesn't change anything fundamentally. And where they're actually doing things that they do day to day, it really doesn't change much at all. And so the impact is very very surface.
Yeah.
It doesn't really, it's just cosmetic.
So if we now zoom out again, and
Mhm.
so you do that with specific leaders inside the organization, how do you then work at the same time? I'm just guessing that it's important for the top management or the management who is asked you to do that to be on the same trip, because if they're not aligned with your ways of thinking and understanding their behaviors, like you literally said, assumptions, and then going towards creating new beliefs, it's not going to match. How do you work with that?
That's a great question. So you just have to do the exact same thing by using the same questions, just in the different context that the senior management team is working from. And you're absolutely right. If the senior leadership is not willing to engage there in that way, um, they don't help. And the moment that changes start to be really real, they end up kind of thwarting it. So I would say that honestly, probably I'm going to take a rough guess here, but of the people that reach out that want to do this and say, I really want to learn how we can create change as a capability,
Hmm.
it's a minority. Maybe it's 20%, maybe it's 10%. I don't know, that actually have the stomach for it. Because the first thing I refer to as kind of having the stomach for the long game, because you have to say, I'm going to start with me. And again, if you start with yourself, so I'll give you an example of a different organization. I worked with an organization that's gone through a lot of changes, in a different incarnation than it was back then, but was a big global paper company. And the CEO really wanted people to be able to really say what they were thinking and challenge ideas. And so he made a point of role modeling that and saying, hey, if you think I'm wrong, you can call me out on it. Now,
Hmm.
you need to have something useful to say, something intelligent. Don't just say, I think you're wrong. But I will listen to it. And if you're right, I will listen. So when people started trying to do it, for somebody kind of call it, so Ron, I don't think you've got that right here. And here's why. And he listened to it. And he's like, here's what I think. This is why I think I'm still right on this, but I really appreciate that. People are like, well, okay, he listened, but he didn't change anything. It happened 2 or 3 times. The third or fourth time, he's like, so, and he wrote an email to the company. Here's my mistake. Here's where I was wrong.
Yeah.
Thank you, XYZ, for pointing it out to me. We're going to do it this way now. It's been made clear to me what I got wrong. And he was really overt about role modeling that and demonstrating that he would change himself. This created that kind of psychological safety across the organization for people to do it. It was a really, really strong message. So if you don't have that at the top of the house, it can be really hard. You can make some progress, but you're going to make progress, I think, to a point, and then you're going to kind of get hung up because senior leaders, especially ones that have been around a long time or are founders, etc., have such a huge impact on what the organizational culture is.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's quite interesting that you say give that example as well with the leader, because that is really that's true leadership, which is like being open, being vulnerable, and showing that you're changing, that you're learning, that you're part of it. And I'm at least in my history, I have seen it a couple of times, but not too often. Let's say it like this. It's not normal in
Yeah.
our society that you are open and vulnerable as a leader of an organization, specifically in
Yeah.
business.
Yeah, absolutely right. And it's funny. I mean, you look at like Brene Brown's research, it shows that people being open and vulnerable to themselves, it feels like tremendous weakness and risk. And to everyone else around them, it looks like strength. And when
Yeah,
you've seen those leaders, you say, that's a strong leader. That is someone who knows their mind because they're willing to change it. I mean, you see them as even stronger than the
yeah,
ones who fight for something that we don't believe in. But there's still so many that do that kind of fight and resist and believe. One of the concepts of the book I talk about is valuing learning over knowing. And one of the influences of that was Ed Hess, who with Catherine Ludwig wrote a beautiful book called Humility is the New Smart. And he talks about the fact that what we know to be true today has a shelf life of about 3 years, which is a fascinating
yeah,
statistic. I don't know where it comes from. I'd like to know. But if that's the case, I mean, things we thought that were true cease to be true. And what we've done in our society is said that if you're not right, you're wrong. But that's not true. if you're not right, it may be that you're no longer right. And that's very different because
Yeah.
circumstances and things have changed, and what you did and built and said and acted upon was right until it wasn't. And it doesn't invalidate that it was right all along. Now it's just no longer right or right enough. And we have to be aware of that. And what we do know is the pace of change has accelerated so greatly, and technology has done that, that we're going to find ourselves not being right enough or no longer right more often than not. Yet we're still operating in a world where the rules of organizational leadership are built for stability, not disruption.
Yeah. And specifically, you get to being the CEO or being the managing director of an organization because of what you have done in the past. And that most probably, at least in 80% of the cases, will not serve you to be successful in the future because the time is so fast and changes are coming and
Yeah,
we need to
yeah.
adapt.
You're so right, Jens. And I talk about in the book, and being in the innovation space, you'll know Clay Christensen's work, from the Innovator's Dilemma.
Yeah.
Before his passing, I had the great privilege to spend an afternoon with Clay up at Harvard, and it was just like a small group, like four of us having a discussion, and we were talking about this very thing. And he said to me, he goes, Michael, I'm having an epiphany here. I hadn't thought about this, but it used to be that we had to build the skills and do the work and get the experience to get the role. Now we're in the role and we need to build the experiences and get the skills to stay in that role.
Yeah.
And we talked about that and how incredibly destabilizing that is, because as a leader who's grown up this way, all of a sudden it challenges your right to be in this position of power and status and authority and leadership, which you greatly value as an individual and in your society. And there's a majority of those people say, no, we're going to stick with the old rules because that's just so much safer. I feel much safer. And there's a minority that say, cool, so I'm the right person to be here. I'm the right woman to be here. I got here with everything I did. But now, to stay here, I need to go here, but I'm the best positioned person to do that because of what I've done before. And it's a very, very different mindset that allows you to move into that place of humility and vulnerability and learning and growth, and therefore become just so much better than you are now. Because, if we're not learning, then we've peaked. We're there.
Yeah.
We're never getting any better.
Yeah. So how do you take an organization, if we go back to the case, which is a large digital transformation across the whole value chain? I mean, you already pictured it that you do this in smaller pieces, and you work with leaders in the organization who are ready to take that challenge. Most probably over time, let's say you have done a couple of success stories, and it's hopefully celebrated in the organization, but you always find that there are resistors, and that might
Yeah.
be in the management team, and that might be somewhere in a very important part of the business where everyone knows that this part of the business needs to be part of this, or the manager who is not, let's say, not playing along is very, very important because responsible about a big area. How do you work with these situations?
Yeah, great question. So two things come to mind. One is something a friend of mine says. Again, Dave Meredith, I've worked with extensively, does some coaching for me now. He says, be wary of making the mistake of mistaking engagement and change for resistance to change. Because if people are getting into it and having the dialogue, that's actually engagement with it. I mean, they're not sure the change you have is right, but they're not just the resistance that I don't want to see is the play dead resistance, just this nod and smile and ignore everything. I want the people that'll fight and get in and really, engage, because then we can figure out if there's something we need to change or do different in our change, etc. But the other one is you will have some of those people who are not up for it, are not willing to make the change. And there's a couple of things you can do. The less easy one is if that person has a position or a place of authority that is not going to get questioned or taken away from them, then you just have to work around until you get such a groundswell around them that they start to give in more, and they'll retard the process down some, and there'll be a bit of a problem, but they can't stop everything usually. The other one is, like, I think of organizations, when people would always ask me, even when I was at Gartner, well, where have you seen a really successful digital transformation? And there aren't many companies that come to mind. I'll give you one. It's based out of Portland, Oregon. It's a company called Cambia Healthcare, Health Systems. And when they embarked upon their transformation, one of the things they did is they were really clear about this is where we're going. And yes, it is a big departure from where we've been. And it calls into questions a lot of things that we did that worked and got us here. We're going to have to put aside, even though they still work, to do something different because they're incompatible.
Mm.
And they were also really clear that if you're unwilling to engage and be a part of this, then we're going to have to, with great respect and love, find a place for you outside of the organization. And they made some really, really tough calls with longtime people who were really great contributors, but who just said, I can't go on this journey with you.
Yeah.
So at some point you have to decide, and you don't do this willy-nilly, but at some point you have to decide if they're unwilling to go on the journey. You have to have that conversation with them and get to a point where you agree they're unwilling to go because this is what willing looks like. And then you have to make those hard calls. And that's also something we're not good with, especially a lot of our legacy organizations that have grown up, have had people there for a long, long time, where the social contract is, I do my part and I get taken care of.
Yeah.
And now we've changed the rules. We've changed the game. And that's very discombobulating to people. And it tears the social fabric of some organizations, because we also don't have a really honorable way and respectful way to move people on. Generally, it's less so. When we finally get to that point, everyone's frustrated, and then it's kind of unpleasant.
Yeah. Agree. And I really like that example where it's about clarity of the direction of travel, which gets everyone understanding very early on. This is where we are going, and we go there. There's no question of that we're turning, maybe
Yeah,
slightly on the way, but it's not really turning backwards. Um,
exactly.
and I agree. It's a very difficult thing, even in society, that we still need to learn of. How do we help people who have been part of the past and have been part of the success to be still successful with what they have done, but maybe not contributing to that business right now, but as well taking the responsibility of the organization and saying, we don't let you fall. And that's,
Well,
I mean,
exactly.
that's very, very difficult one, and specifically in different parts of the world. If you're a large global company, because the rules and things are very different everywhere.
They are. And you bring up something really important here, which is oftentimes that unwillingness to go along, or that resistance, is something that we've built into them. It's
Mm.
our fault because, um, you know, staying true to a course, all the things that they displayed to get them there. And we rewarded them and say, what matters more than learning, and executing is what important. Don't worry about what you're executing on. And we've done all these things. So we've built the perfect beast, and we've gotten to that point, and we have to take some culpability and responsibility for the fact that some of our organizations are, I mean, just that far beyond, Frederick Taylor, and telling people to move pig iron around. I mean, we haven't changed much in
Mm.
our organization structures and ways of working since the industrial era. And people will challenge that and say, "Oh, Michael, come on, look at Agile, look at what we're doing, like Googles and Amazons, et cetera." It's like, yeah, but how many Googles and Amazons are there? How many people actually, when they do Agile, remember that the first law of the Agile Manifesto is people and interactions over processes and tools? They don't. They go right to processes and tools, and they do it the same old way. And most of us aren't digital natives who
Yeah.
reinvent ourselves. Most of us aren't Netflix. We've been around a lot longer, and we've been successful in a world of stability. We haven't entered into the world of instability to start with. So we've set it up that way. It reminds me of a guy I worked for once, a wonderful leader named Jean-Claude Cassavant, who said to me, every organization gets the union it deserves. And that's how he approached, labor relations, was let's deserve, the union relationship that we want, and how we work with them. Well, basically every leader gets the organization that he or she deserves by the culture they've built.
Yeah. And I think I 100% agree. The difficult part is really how do we enable companies to change the culture, to adapt to the needs of the future? Because I mean, we're literally still kind of in a pandemic state worldwide.
Yeah.
In some countries more, in some countries less. But what we have learned over the last, let's say, 2 years, we need to change,
Yeah.
and change is quicker, and the demand is there. We we are now in a learning phase of we need to adapt the cultural parts as a society for sure, but specifically in businesses to survive going forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is why, I continue to always lead with, look, you don't make a change, you build a change capability in an organization, and you build it at the lowest level in the organization.
Hmm.
Give me an example. An organization I worked with is a tale of two forklift drivers. One forklift driver in a facility, if you ask them what they do, he'd say, well, I get the order, I go around, I build the pallet, I wrap it, and I put it in the line for it to go out. A little damage is okay, not too much. These are my tolerances, and that's what I do. And sometimes I have to stay late because we're tight on labor. Okay, that's what they do. You talk to somebody else, say, well, what do you do? So I make sure that when a consumer walks into the store, they get the products they need of the way they want, when they want them. And so I know that I have to be a part of this value chain that goes from how do I actually pull these off the shelf and what order do I put them on? When do I make an exception to the normal policy because of how the shelving works at these stores over in this part of town? Because I've talked to those guys when we chat, and I know that if I do it this way, I'm going to save 3.5% productivity in a given
Yeah.
day. So I need that because that adds up to probably X amount. I mean, and I've had this conversation with two forklift drivers, that looked the same. And they were the kind of people that many leaders may overlook. Somebody, from a different, country where they were born, speak a different language natively,
Yeah.
heavily covered in tattoos or something, that get the whole value chain of their part of the job and how to make it better. That's that culture that we want, to build in an organization. And so we build it by giving them some simple tools, which are, here are some questions to ask, and we demonstrate for them the safety in asking those questions. We have that, we can start to make a change.
Yeah. And I think connected to that question is also then coming up with the answers, which then leads them to take decisions which they maybe normally are not allowed to in,
Exactly.
in,
Yeah,
in the old
exactly.
structure.
Yeah, it's funny because I know that. I mean, you're all about innovation, and I love how the worlds of data and innovation combine. And I've talked to my friends. I have some friends that are, run companies that do data visualization. I said, look, great data is amazing, but if you don't feel like you can make a change based on what it's telling you, what's the point? Because we'll get all this data and we'll look at it. I think it means this. I think it means that. Oh, well, let's do this. Well, no, that decision gets made up here. You're kind of above your pay grade now.
Yeah.
Well, then
Yeah.
why'd you give me the data in the first place? It just becomes a source of frustration. So, but if those people are allowed to make those exceptions, and you know what, people understand if you limit exceptions, and you also can say that one of the things that happens in organizations is we're so addicted to scale, we're so addicted to execution that when we come up with an answer and a good answer, then we say, well, it has to be the answer. We talked before
Yeah.
we started
Yeah.
about best practices, right? Let's shove them down people's throats. No, let's tell people what's working elsewhere so they have that data as they make their decision. And you know what? Sometimes they're going to make a wrong choice. Is it going to be devastating? No, it's going to impact productivity for that day or that week. But man, they're going to learn from it if we say, great, good experience, good learning. What did you learn? What would you do for next time? Awesome job for giving it a try. That changes everything about how they're going to interact, as opposed to, what, you're off productivity, I'm docking your pay, you should do what you're told. That just destroys creativity and productivity and innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. So how you if we go back to the case, how would you help this organization to, I mean, I can imagine at least that they need to have a different operating structure as well to be able to do that. So it's like, how is the organizational structure changing to be able to drive this digital transformation?
Yeah, I mean, they're making some changes to the operating model, and they were, to be very honest, the one company was given that we're talking about was given an operating model designed by a big consulting firm. And I remember looking at all the stuff, interviews and work they'd done to show how they'd come up with information, all the data they got. And it reminded me of something my wife says. We just relocated to the Pacific Northwest, and we actually are moving into the home that my parents, my in-laws owned when they were alive.
Hmm.
And they had all this stuff in it still. And my wife will walk around, she go, look at all these things that used to be money. When I looked at this PowerPoint deck, I thought, look at all this information that used to be money. And they came up with a design that was maybe 80% right, 20% off. And the leadership team knew it immediately. But they initially felt like, well, we have to do this because it's been bought and paid for, and it'll be embarrassing if we don't use it just as it is. Until we had an executive leader step in and say, nope, nope, no, you do what you want to do. So then they're making, those changes. But the operating model itself is not that difficult. They knew what they needed to do. What their hesitancy is, will we be allowed to do it? Or will these changes have to get approved here and approved there, and kind of the old hierarchy? And people will say, well, that impacts this, or we made an agreement a long time ago and I would have to go revisit that. I don't have time for that, because we love to hold decisions at a high level, but then there's not enough of us to make those decisions and we're not close enough to the problem. But once we make them, don't ask us to go back and revisit the decision. It's like, I've already made that decision. I've got other things I have to do, which is true because you're taking too many decisions at your level. We talk about pushing decisions down. It's not to be lazy. It's because we can't get them done at this level anymore with the pace of change. Yeah. And so we're just handicapping our organization. We have to push them down so we can make the ones that truly matter. And so people can revisit the ones we've already made. And so that's what we're trying to do, is give people a comfort level that they can make those changes, make those decisions, make them right, make them wrong, make them in between, and learn from them. And things are okay in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, then builds a learning organism inside the organization, because one person is doing something right, another person is doing something wrong, and if they're open and sharing it as well, people will learn from each other, so that not everyone needs to do the same mistake.
Totally. And someone will have that moment. One of the great moments is, you did the wrong thing for all the right reasons. It was the right choice to make at the time. You just didn't know it was wrong. You didn't have the data. Now you have that data. Now what would you do? Well, I'd do it this way. Awesome. So that wrong decision was just the decision you had to make on the way to the right one. But we almost have a fetish in business for making the right decision first, which leads to us then sticking by bad decisions for much longer than we should, or decisions that have gone bad for much longer than we should, because we got this value tied up in knowing over learning. We have to be right. I was reading some quote popped up on LinkedIn. I can't remember who it was, but I think it was like Dostoevsky or something. It says, "I really trust the man who realizes he's been a fool at least twice a day." I mean, because that's true. Something to that effect. You need to be able to say, "Oh, here's where I was wrong. Here's where my mistake was," because then you're learning and you're growing. And there are company cultures that do that better. Like I think it was Amgen, the pharmaceutical and research bioscience company, would throw a party every time a prototype of a product failed, because it was like one less thing to get wrong on the road to getting it right. And awesome, that means we've killed now another avenue, and eventually we're going to be on the right avenue from all the many possibilities. But that's not common in our organizations, and that's not how we reward people. It's not our HR and finance and performance management systems are set up. So we have this perfect storm of management systems and performance systems which thwart innovative thinking and creativity.
Yeah. If we go to the case, so you engage with them throughout the whole process. What is your experience? How long it take for an individual leader to really grasp it and getting used to it, and then as well for the whole organization to slowly move into that direction of adapting the new culture?
What a good question. I don't know if I have enough data to answer that effectively, but I will say that it's not, for me, it's not like they cross a point. It's just this gradual thing where they learn more and more. And I find that it tends to be less linear and more, I don't know what's the word I'm looking for, exponentially, but it kind of grows real slow and then takes off. It's sort of like the old, thing about the guy goes to the king and said, he goes, "I'll tell you what, just give me, one piece of grain doubled for every square on the checkerboard until you own the quintillion grains." It tends to work like that with individuals. And so the beautiful part about it as a leader is you don't need to be here or here or here to do this.
Yeah.
You just need to be that one step ahead of the people you're leading. And in
Yeah.
fact, that's the best place to be because it's fresh for you. You have the empathy and it's happening right in front of them. If you can learn, sometimes I'll say to leaders, you're going to need to learn kind of naked on a stage for people here. And that's going to really be uncomfortable at first. And then you're going to find it's a source of great power and great respect from the people around you that see you change and grow. But it's those first couple of times that really, oh man, it feels naked on a stage until you start to get through it. And you stay a little bit ahead, and eventually the curve takes off. And it's the same way with the organization. It happens in pockets, and then it takes off as opposed to this. And so what happens, most corporations are like, I want something to show me this linear progression, and this is a little too slow for them. There's a bit of a leap of faith, but then the line crosses. And, but if you tell an organization, they'll say, have we done it in our industry? What have you done in an industry of our size and our location? Have you done it actually in a company that's exactly us, but just not us? It's our clone in a different dimension. And that might not be safe.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
I'm sure you can.
It's quite interesting for me to see these organizational changes. One thing, it takes let's say a proportional larger amount of time to change the culture, though that the pressure from the external world of needed change is increasing. So yeah, go ahead if you want to
I was
react.
going to say, it takes time to change the whole culture. It takes almost no time at all to change the culture in a place and to start getting results because of that. You can change, people will say, how do you change culture? I'll say, you're going to hate my answer. You change culture by changing the culture. So we find a group that's willing to do that, willing to try, right? And you change the culture by introducing, we're going to ask these questions and learn from them this way. And that change in behavior is a change. And the assumptions it starts to challenge and the beliefs it starts to shift changes its culture.
Yeah.
And so you can actually get the impacts very quickly in areas that matter, in areas that are willing, in areas where you've got enough interest or openness, or in areas you think are really critical that you pick and put your resources there. Because changing the whole organization is not as important in getting results initially as is changing key parts of it.
Yeah.
But then the rest of it follows, and that's great. So the results can actually move much faster than the change curve itself in the organization and impact the organization in an outsized way because of where you make those changes. So, in this organization, one of the areas that we're doing this in is in the planning area. But the planning area is going to have a huge impact on getting things where they need in time, which is going to deliver both margin and market share, which are absolutely critical. And we can deliver margin and market share very quickly through what we're doing here and affect something broadly by what will happen in this organization. Or we can focus on, a particular type of digital fulfillment, right? The fulfillment center. And we can get the people who can maximize the use of that technology by understanding why they really come to work and therefore get way more benefit. Like any tool, you buy a tool, you can get low benefit, projected benefit, much higher benefit depending upon who's using it. So we try and be targeted in where we do that and be really thoughtful. But again, to your point, this is where senior leadership strategic involvement is critical as we pick those places. It's faster overall if you can pick the places thoughtfully from amongst the whole possibility of places than if you just pick the one where you've got a leader a level or two down who's willing and the rest of the organization isn't. Both can work. One's just much faster.
Yeah. And that's exactly the question I wanted to ask. It's really how you literally facilitate, how you curate that it's going to happen. And that's literally what you just answered is. So you find the opportunities where the impact will go fast and where the impact is going to happen. And of course, then I guess you take the leaders who are willing inside of that impact area, and then you create the impact, which then in returns change the culture because it's like a positive effect of for the organization. Hey, we are making more money, or we're increasing market share, which is then like a positive trigger to, hey, we should do more of that.
Yeah, exactly right. And we're for the people who are watching, if you're interested, I'm just about to embark with again a partner of mine, ChangeForce.ai, on a research project. We'll take maybe up to 15 companies of good size,
Yeah.
and take a representative sample of their employees, and we'll use the ChangeForce tool, and for which their employees can look at all these capabilities and basically give them an actual score on 6 different axes out of 30 different measures of what is their change capacity, what is their change ability or capability.
Yeah.
And they'll see that in an anonymous group against their peers. And when you do something like that, it starts to give you a place to target it, and it gives you a language to have around it, because most of the time for senior leaders, change has been something like, we know we need to do it, let's get a consultant, and that's disappointing, or let's give it to the change group. But it's sort of like, it's sort of like there's a car crash, and there's oil everywhere, and people are moaning and groaning, and there's flames, and someone says, well, can we get some change management for safety? It's like, it's a little bit late. We need to start back before the cars hit each other. And so one of the things we're trying to do with this is to give people that snapshot of where are we strong and where are we weak in our change ability. So we have kind of a better perspective on what change will really mean to us, as opposed to something so esoteric.
Yeah, love that. I will put the link as well into the show notes so people can find it. Or shall they directly reach out to you?
You can directly reach out to me just at michaelleckie.com, michaelleckie.com. And we're just about, I think I saw an email today. I'm gonna put it out publicly, and ask companies if they're interested and want to apply, and kind of go through who are the right companies. We need to have a certain size. We need to also have somebody senior enough that they can actually make it happen in the organization, to get the the links out and get people to participate and communicate what we're doing.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be really exciting, because in all the years I've been doing this, I've never really seen a good way to assess change capability based on behaviors, not just on attitudes. We have people judging the behaviors of an organization, not reflecting just their choices and beliefs and opinions. And then we can work with that from there, and really, get that hidden talent to rise up and find those pockets that are the places we want to start, because we want to pick the ones that are strategically important and the ones where we have the best chance of succeeding, so we can start to build momentum. Once you have momentum, things happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that, and I hope to contribute with driving a couple of people from from the live show towards you as well. So everyone who is interested in that, please reach out, and either directly to Michael or to me, and we will connect you. As the last part of the live show, I'm always asking the people joining me, the guests, what is your dream customer? Can you describe your dream customer to everyone who is watching, so that they might identify themselves and say, hey, Michael, I'm your dream customer, we should work together?
Yeah. I think my dream customer is the person who comes to me and says, I know we have to do something very different, and I have no idea how to get there. Those are the people I love, because they're willing to say, I don't know how to do this. When I advise my C-suite clients and CEOs and hiring people, I said, hire somebody who said, I'm willing to sign up for a project I have no idea how I'm going to deliver. That's great. So if you know that you need to get somewhere and you have no idea how you're going to get there, but you do suspect that the culture is going to be an issue, and you are up for let's find out and let's get in there and go and do it. You're the right person for me, and I'd be delighted to work with you.
And do you have a country limit, or is it like globally, worldwide?
Nope, globally, worldwide. I've had conversations this week with companies in Europe and Dubai and Singapore and all across the U.S. and Canada. So, I'm happy to get on calls in the middle of the night. I'm happy to do the travel if it's warranted as well. I'm just looking for great clients, because, to be very, very honest with you, like I said, probably 90% of the people that contact me don't quite have the stomach for it, or don't have the support in the organization where they're at to do it. They really want to, but they just can't quite go there yet. And I'm looking for those very few. I'm looking for those ones who say we want to do something startlingly different here that makes us stand out. We're looking for that exponential change that everyone talks about, and we're willing to, personally, myself, I'm willing to do the hard work to make that happen within me so I can inspire that within my organization.
Yeah, love that. So, for everyone watching, listening, as well, the recordings later on, if you see yourself, please go to of course, to the show page. I'm just opening up the banner again, which is heitlandinnovation.com/innovation culture coding. There you will find the landing page, and of course, everything about Michael, the book, which we have slightly touched, um, which we will promote there a little bit more. We will find links to click through directly to Michael and more. Michael,
Yeah.
it was a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here. And yeah, for those who want to get a small taste, michaelleckie.com, but also
Yeah.
The Heart of Transformation is out, and that'll give you a perspective on how I approach things to maybe for you to judge, am I the right consultant or partner for you in this? But thank you, Jens. It's been a real pleasure to be on your show. You ask great questions, and I love that.
Thank you. I've learned a lot. So I have two A4 pages of notes which are going into my golden nuggets. It's always great to learn. Thank you
Cool.
very much, Michael. And for everyone who is watching or listening to the recording, see you in the next live show, which is already on Thursday this week. So Thursday is the next live show, and I have a female guest again. Looking forward to that. And until then, see you in the next shows or podcasts. Thank you very much.
Cheers.